Hi folks, Lou Pulsfer here, and I'm going to talk about planning for simplicity in game design. In other words, when you're conceiving and making the details of what you want to have as a game. Now, I've talked in a video recently about how to simplify a game when you run into a problem, but this is a more difficult topic for me. It's about how to plan a game to be simple from the start. Of course, you aren't always going to want a game that's simple in conception, but I think more often than not you should. It depends on what you're trying to do. Are you making a game? Are you making a puzzle? Or are you doing something else? Here's a list of the things I'm going to talk about. I'll talk about each one in turn. First of all, you gotta wanna. You gotta want to make it simple. Attitudes count for a lot in any aspect of life. And if you don't want simplicity, and I mean want it, not just, oh yeah, I kind of want that, you're much less likely to get it. You've got to be thinking about simplicity as you conceive your game, write down the details, and make the prototype. To me, the mechanics of a game are a means to enable the players to create a possibly competitive story. And so you want to focus on what's going to happen with the people, not the mechanics. Mechanics are not an end in themselves, though some people treat them so. For example, saying, this is a worker placement game. No, this game is about something else, unless it's a purely abstract game. Next, you want to limit the scope of the game. The more you try to do with a game, the less simple it's likely to be, naturally. For example, if you want to model 1,000 years of British history, you've got a tough job making it simple. In my game Britannia, I think I made it relatively simple, but there are a lot of exceptions to the rules for history. If you want a puzzle game, then complexity is nearly inevitable to make the puzzle harder. Focus on a few things you want the game to show or do. The more you try to do, the less simple the game will be. How's that for an obvious statement? At some point, you could write the essence of the game, which is a few sentences, and that might help you decide what to leave out. You might make a list of the major content or the major mechanisms or what stands out, and then decide what's less important and can be left out of the game. Choose simple mechanisms. Some mechanics or mechanisms are more complex than others. We could take the combat in Dungeons and Dragons as an example. The basis of the combat is very simple. When you use THAC0 to hit armor class 0, you roll a d20, you add your plus, which depends on your weapon and your level, but that rarely changes. And that determines whether you hit. And you roll your damage if you hit, and that's it. There's no detailed comparisons of armor type, hit location, dodging, and so forth that we see in a lot of other RPGs. Now, Gary Gygax probably overdid the detail because he included armor type and weapon type, but the basis can be used without the detail. The next point is, if something's hard to explain as you make notes or as you explain it to somebody else, it's probably not simple. Something may shine in your mind, but if it's not simple, maybe you should skip that part of the game. Or you should find a different way to do it. I recall playtesting a prototype of a world-spanning trading colonization game from like the 17th century, 18th century. There were certain mechanics to enable colonists and fleets to move around. And once people got them, it was okay, but it was hard for them to understand. And if I hadn't been there to help them figure it out, it might not have worked. So I said, this cannot be born. I have to change it. And so I changed the rules to make them simpler, and that problem went away. Now that was something that is a problem that turned up in testing, so it's not quite the same as when you're starting out, but maybe I should have recognized that those mechanics were too complicated. No self-indulgence. To simplify, you need to be ruthless. You need to be ready to throw out your baby, to get rid of the very element that may have caused you to start making the game in the first place. And the sooner you can do that, the better. Now that might turn up in playtesting, or it might turn up even before you start to playtest the game. Now, if you're making an abstract game, a game that doesn't model anything, it's easier to simplify. Historically, though perhaps not so much today, Euro-style board games have been abstract, with a theme, quote unquote, tacked on. Arcade-style games can border on abstract sometimes, despite photorealism and lots of detail. In general, remember, your attitude is what's most important. If you want to make a simple game, you've got a chance to do so. Thanks for listening.